The wind was dry that morning, rustling the brittle grass like parchment being crumpled by an unseen hand. Dawn stretched its fingers over the distant mesas, painting the horizon in rust and gold. The desert breathed slow and wide, and the only sound besides the breeze was the soft creak of an old wooden gate swinging open. Elias Boone stepped out onto the porch of his ranch house, the boards groaning under his boots like they remembered every step he'd ever taken. He was a tall man, not as broad as he once was, but still carrying the kind of weight that came from years behind a plow, a rifle, and a life half lived in silence. His hat shadowed a face carved by sun and solitude, with lines around the eyes not from laughter, but long days staring into distance. He hadn't spoken a word to another soul in 4 months, not since a passing trader had asked for directions and got a nod instead. Elias preferred the quiet. He fed his cattle, mended fences, patched his roof, and at night sat on the porch watching stars blink to life one by one, like old memories surfacing. But this morning, something was different. At the edge of his pasture, where his land met the wild that stretched for miles, he saw a shape slumped by the split-rail fence. From a distance, it looked like a bundle of old cloth, tangled in tumbleweed. But as he stepped down off the porch and moved closer, the shape shifted. It was a girl. She was curled like a cornered animal, knees pulled to her chest, head resting on her arms. Dirt masked the natural color of her skin, and her dress, if you could call it that, was little more than torn linen and desperation. Her hair hung in clumps across her face, streaked with dust and something darker. But her breathing was steady. Not peaceful, not easy, but steady. Elias stood 5 feet away, saying nothing. She must have felt his shadow or sensed him somehow, because her head lifted slowly. Her eyes met his. They were sharp, those eyes. Not pleading, not grateful, just aware, like she had counted every rock on the road behind her and had already measured the weight of dying on the spot. He'd seen that look before. Years ago, in a war he tried not to remember. Been here long? Elias asked, voice rough from disuse. She blinked slow. Said nothing. He glanced at the horizon. No wagon tracks. No horse prints. She had come on foot, most likely, through terrain that could kill a man twice her size. You hungry? Still nothing. Her jaw twitched, but her lips stayed sealed. Pride or fear? He couldn't tell. He shifted his weight, then looked back at the house, the porch, the empty rocker, the second place set at the table he never used. My name's Boone, he said finally. Again, no answer. But she didn't look away. He wasn't sure what stirred in him then, pity, memory, or just the fact that she hadn't begged or explained. She just sat there like the world had tried to erase her and failed to finish the job. You're my wife now, he said suddenly, not entirely sure why. Her brow furrowed. Still no words, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or wariness. He turned and walked back toward the house, not looking to see if she followed. On the porch, he paused, hand on the door. After a few moments, he heard the fence creak, then soft, scraping footsteps across dry soil. She climbed the steps and stood behind him, not quite inside, not quite out. He opened the door. Inside was a simple room. A stove, a table, a cot, and an old rocker near the window. It smelled of smoke and pine soap. He gestured to the chair at the table. She sat. He set a tin plate in front of her and ladled out beans from a pot warming on the stove. She didn't touch the spoon, just stared at the food like it might vanish if she blinked. Then, slowly, she began to eat, carefully, like each bite had to last longer than the last. Boone sat across from her, chewing a biscuit without much appetite. He watched her, not in a threatening way, but like he was trying to read a page in a language he used to know. She didn't speak. Not that day. But she didn't leave either. That night, she lay curled on the cot in the corner, clutching the blanket like it might be taken from her. Boone stayed in the rocker, shotgun across his lap, eyes on the window and the door. Nothing came. Just wind and stars. The days that followed passed quietly. She swept the floor, without being asked, helped him haul water from the well, sat on the porch in the evenings, saying nothing, but no longer looking like she might bolt into the desert. Her eyes stayed wary, But they weren't empty. Elias never asked where she came from. He figured if she wanted to tell him, she would. And if she didn't, then maybe it was best not to know. The West had a way of chewing folks up, and some things were better left buried. But there was something in her, like a wire pulled too tight, awaiting storm. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, both knew something had begun that morning at the fence. Something neither of them understood yet. But the desert had heard his words. "You're my wife now." And in the silence that followed, the land itself seemed to lean in and listen. The days that followed Mara's arrival passed with a quiet rhythm, like the ticking of a clock wound too tight. She moved about the ranch like a ghost learning how to walk again. Though her steps were cautious, each one seemed more certain than the last. Boone didn't ask questions. He cooked. She cleaned. He mended the fence. She stacked firewood. No words passed between them that didn't need to. Yet something unspoken stirred beneath the stillness. Not affection, at least not yet, but understanding. A recognition of things lost and not yet named. It wasn't long before the town started to murmur. Silver Hollow was 15 miles east, a clutch of weather-worn buildings, huddled at the edge of the canyon wall. The general store clerk, a man with a mustache far more ambitious than his business sense, noticed Boone buying extra flour and cloth. "Boone feeding someone?" he muttered to the blacksmith. 2 days later, word reached the saloon. By the week's end, the story grew legs. "Old Boone's got a girl out there," they said. "Showed up half dead and didn't say a word. Now he's calling her wife." Some scoffed. Others whispered darker things. Runaway thief, maybe. A trap. A curse. That girl wasn't right, they said. Nobody just appears on Boone's land without a reason. Boone didn't care. But Mara heard the rumors when he took her into town one morning for supplies. As they hitched the mule near the livery, a little boy pointed at her and whispered something to his mother. The woman pulled him away like Mara carried some invisible disease. She said nothing all the way back to the ranch, but her hands trembled when she loaded the flour into the pantry. That night, Boone found her behind the barn. She stood in the moonlight, her back straight, staring out at the desert. In her hands was a small silver locket, old, tarnished, and too delicate for someone like her. He recognized it. He had seen it once before. It had belonged to his wife. Boone stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "Where'd you get that?" Mara didn't turn. "Found it. Near a ridge in Abandoned Valley. That's 100 miles south." I walked farther. A silence settled between them, the kind that doesn't ask for filling. "That locket was hers," Boone said, voice soft but stern. "She lost it before the end." "I didn't know," Mara said, fingers curling around the chain. "I wasn't stealing. I just needed something that wasn't covered in dust." Boone studied her in the pale light. She looked older in moments like this, like someone carved out of survival and secrets. "You keep it," he said finally, then turned back toward the house. The next day, a rider arrived. He came just after noon, dust trailing behind him like smoke. Wore a clean sheriff's star, but his eyes said bounty hunter. He dismounted slow, calm, and tied his horse to Boone's gate like he owned it. Boone met him by the porch, arms folded. "Name's Deputy Harold Connors," the man said. "Came up from Red Mesa, tracking a fugitive. Girl, early 20s. Name of Mara Cade." Boone's jaw tightened. "Ain't seen her." The deputy tilted his head. "Strange. Folks in Silver Hollow said otherwise. She's wanted for robbery and fraud. Couple bank accounts drained dry. Left 3 men gut shot in Texas." Boone didn't flinch. "Ain't seen her," he repeated. Connors frowned, tipped his hat. "You always did like strays, Boone, but some strays bite." With that, he mounted and rode off, not looking back. Inside the house, Mara sat by the window, locket clutched in her palm. "You lied for me," she said. "I don't like the law sniffing around my place," Boone replied, setting his rifle on the mantel. She nodded, then asked, "Do you believe what he said?" "I believe there's always more to a story." That night, Mara did not sleep. Instead, she went out to the barn and uncovered something Boone didn't expect anyone to find: an old trunk buried beneath hay and tools. Inside were weapons wrapped in oilcloth, maps marked with trails no longer used, and a worn cavalry jacket with Boone's name sewn inside. Boone found her at dawn, sitting cross-legged beside the open trunk. "You fought in the 6th Missouri," she said. "I did." "You were a scout." "I was a lot of things." She looked up at him then, really looked. "So was I." And she told him the truth. Her real name was Mara Cade, yes. But the charges, some were true, some not. She'd been part of a traveling outfit once, a performance troupe that doubled as a con ring. She played the daughter of a fake preacher, sold snake oil, flirted with ranchers and bankers, while others picked pockets. Then they tangled with the wrong man, Silas Deeds. He ran the Hell Creek Gang, known across 4 states. They burned towns, took hostages, broke every rule. When they offered the troupe a partnership, the group agreed, too scared to say no. Mara didn't run right away. She stayed, watched, learned. Then one night, she found a ledger in Silas's tent. It wasn't money they were after, it was names. People they could blackmail, control. Lawmen, judges, even federal agents. She took the ledger. Or rather, she memorized it. Every name, every number. Then she ran. Boone listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said only this: "They'll come looking." "I know." He closed the trunk slowly, the dust rising like smoke. "Well then," he said, "we'd better be ready." The barn door creaked in the wind. Outside, the desert watched. And far off in the distance, a black-feathered crow flew in widening circles, like it had caught the scent of something old rising from a grave. By the 3rd week, the silence around the ranch had changed. It no longer felt like solitude. It felt like waiting. Mara stood on the ridge behind Boone's barn at dawn, eyes fixed on the horizon. She'd been watching the canyons for days, the same way a deer watches a dry creek bed in snake season. Every shadow twitched with meaning now. Every gust of wind carried the scent of memory and the threat of return. Boone joined her quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He didn't ask if she slept. He already knew the answer. She hadn't slept a full night since she told him the truth. "How long?" she asked. He sipped from his mug. "If they're coming, they'll do it soon. Outlaws don't wait when they're angry. And Deeds, he's not the kind to let go." The name hung in the air like smoke. Silas Deeds. A name carried by wanted posters and whispered warnings. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a reputation, shaped by fire and steel. No lawman had ever caught him. No town had ever forgotten him. He had a face like a preacher and a mind like a trap. And when he lost something, he didn't chase it. He hunted it. Mara had been his prodigy once, his shadow. She learned charm and deceit from the inside of his circle. That made her betrayal personal. "I memorized every name in that ledger," she said. "He can't risk me alive." Boone nodded. "Then we don't give him the chance." By noon, the first rider came. Not fast, not reckless, just slow and deliberate. A scout. He rode up to the fence line, studied the house from a distance, and turned back the way he came. Mara watched him through Boone's spyglass. "That's Jeb Tunney. Deeds knife hand. Never says a word. If he's here, the rest are close." That night, Boone lit no lanterns. He and Mara sat at the table in the dark, their dinner untouched. "You could leave," Boone said at last. "So could you." He nodded, as if he expected that answer. "Figured." "I've run long enough," she said, then added with a quiet breath, "And if I run now, I'll be running forever." The next day, 2 more riders passed, one east, one west. Neither came close, but they left tracks. Mara examined them in the dirt. They're circling, mapping. They know you're not just an old man in the hills. Boone chuckled. "That part's true, but they don't know the rest." Inside the barn, he opened another trunk. This one held tools older than Mara, coil traps, signal flares, sharpened stakes, strips of rawhide hardened for tripwires. Mara studied them with a quiet awe. "You were more than a scout. War teaches you things. You learn to see with your ears, fight with your patience. Think it'll be enough?" He paused. "Only has to be once." They spent that afternoon preparing, not with panic, but purpose. The house became a fortress, modest, but clever. Windows were shuttered and reinforced. Ropes stretched through the dry grass, connected to makeshift alarms, tin cans, glass shards, cowbells. Boone dug shallow trenches at choke points near the barn. Mara positioned rifles in the loft, with a clear line of sight to the gate. But perhaps most importantly, Boone showed her the escape route, an old dry tunnel once used to store grain, long since collapsed at one end but passable if you knew the bends. "If I fall, you run," he said. She shook her head. "If you fall, I fight harder." He didn't argue, just nodded once, and that was enough. That evening, they watched the sky turn blood-red behind the buttes. The wind carried ash from a distant fire. Someone had burned something out in Hell Creek. A warning or a farewell. "They're close," Mara said, her voice a near whisper. "Deeds doesn't wait for nightfall. He likes to arrive with light, so you see him coming." "How many will he bring?" "5, maybe 6. That's all he trusts." "Then we're even." She looked at him. "You said you've taken down a gang before?" Boone's gaze didn't leave the horizon. "No," he said. "I've been in one." That caught her off guard. "When the war ended," he explained, "men like me didn't fit into peace. We drifted, took what we needed, rode with those who didn't ask questions. But one night, I looked around and realized I was riding with men like Deeds, and I walked away. And they let you." I gave him a choice. She studied him differently then, not as a protector, but as something deeper. A man shaped by roads not taken, battles not spoken of, and guilt carved into bone. By dawn the next morning, the air was different, heavier. Even the birds stayed quiet. Boone sat cleaning his rifle at the kitchen table when he heard it, the unmistakable crunch of hooves on dry earth. Not fast, not afraid. He stood, pulled back the curtain, and saw them. 6 riders, black dusters, bandanas around their necks. And in the center, riding a pale horse like some twisted angel, was Silas Deeds. He looked like a man carved from charm and rot, handsome in a distant, unsettling way. His eyes were calm, but dead behind the gleam. Mara stood behind Boone, staring through the same gap in the curtain. She didn't breathe. "He brought the whole hand," she said. "Then let's show him the tables changed." Boone turned to her, placed a revolver in her hand, then took another for himself. "You remember what I said?" She nodded. But this time, she didn't feel like someone running. She felt like someone standing on the line between what was and what must be. Outside, the riders dismounted. They weren't here to talk. The desert held its breath. And the war, whatever form it now took, was about to begin. They came without a word. The sun sat low behind the riders, like a furnace waiting to explode, casting their shadows long across the dust-choked yard. Deeds dismounted first, taking his time, boots crunching on gravel. He wore a smile like a blade hidden in velvet. Boone and Mara stood in the doorway of the house, silent, unflinching. "You know why we're here," Deeds called, voice smooth as tanned leather. "I ain't much for speeches, Boone. Just hand her over, and we'll be on our way." Boone stepped forward once. "She's not yours." "Ah," Deeds said, rubbing his chin. "See, I figured you might feel that way. But it ain't about ownership. It's about debt. She took something, and debts have a way of dragging behind a person like chains." Mara spoke then, stepping into the open. "I didn't take your gold, Silas. I took the names. The truth." Deeds smiled wider, but his eyes stayed cold. "Darlin', it was never about the truth. It was about the power of keeping it buried." He took a step closer. His men spread out behind him, 3 to the left, 2 to the right, moving toward cover. Boone's voice cut the air. "You step past that gate, Silas. You're making a choice you can't take back." Silas glanced at the simple wooden fence between them, the same one Mara had collapsed beside weeks ago. He reached out, rested a hand on the top rail, and leaned in. "I already did." Then he crossed. The air snapped taut like a pulled bowstring. Before his boots even touched the ground inside the gate, a shot rang out, sharp, clean. The bell by the barn shattered, spinning through the air like a coin tossed by God. One of Deeds' men, crouching behind a feed trough, dropped to his knees, clutching his arm. Boone was already moving, ducking into the house, and firing again through the side window. The shot cracked clean through the wheel of the lead horse's saddle, sending it bucking wildly. Chaos bloomed like desert wildfire. Mara took to the loft, her rifle steady on the windowsill, jaw set, eyes narrowed. She picked her mark carefully, the lean man behind the water barrel. She exhaled, squeezed the trigger. He spun, staggered, then dropped like a sack of wheat. Below, Boone worked methodically, his old instincts awakening like a beast roused from winter sleep. He knew the terrain, knew the angles. He'd rigged the back pasture with glass and gravel, and now it screamed with every step the enemy took. Silas barked orders, calm but sharp. Flank left. Smoke him out. Boone's just an old dog with tired bones. He didn't know Boone had wired the left flank with a trip snare. A man rounded the corner, rifle raised, and vanished beneath a cascade of dirt and horse tack. He screamed as he fell, his leg caught, his rifle gone. From the loft, Mara turned her aim to Deeds. He was too fast, darting between shadows, pressing forward, but she didn't shoot. Not yet. Not until it mattered. Boone caught sight of her hesitation through the kitchen window. "Don't wait on fate," he whispered to himself. "'Cause it never waits on you." He kicked the back door open and rolled into the corral, landing behind a trough. The earth shook with every footstep. His lungs burned from grit and smoke. Then he saw him. Deeds. Just 10 yards ahead. Calm. Alone. Holding his revolver down at his side. Finger resting. Waiting. They stared at each other. The years between them were heavy. Boone saw the boy Deeds once was wide-eyed, sharp-tongued, hungry. But now he was a man too used to winning. "Funny thing," Deeds said, taking a step closer. "I always wondered how a ghost like you got to live this long. Turns out, all you did was hide." "I wasn't hiding," Boone said. "I was healing." Deeds laughed low and dry. "You picked a strange nurse." Behind them, Mara slid down from the loft. She moved without sound, stepping between fence beams and broken shadows. The wind had picked up now, kicking red dust into the sky like a curtain lowering before the final act. Deeds didn't see her coming. Boone did, but he didn't warn her. He trusted her. She moved to 10 feet behind Deeds, took aim, and said his name just once. "Silas." He turned. She didn't hesitate. The shot struck him low in the side, not fatal, but enough. He fell to one knee, gun dropping. Boone rushed in, boot to revolver, pressing Deeds into the dirt. Blood bloomed slowly beneath the outlaw's vest. Behind them, the remaining 2 riders dropped their weapons and ran. No order, no loyalty, just flight. The gang, once feared, unraveled in seconds. Boone didn't chase them. He looked down at Deeds, coughing now, furious and pale. "You had every chance to be more than what you became," Boone said. "But you chose power." Deeds laughed through clenched teeth. "And you chose loneliness." Boone didn't answer. He looked to Mara instead. She was standing tall, hands steady, eyes wet, not from weakness, but release. Deeds looked at her with something almost like regret. "You were my best," he said. "Smartest. Quickest. You could have led the whole damn thing." "I am," she replied softly. "Just not the way you meant." Then she turned and walked back toward the house, the setting sun casting her shadow long and sure behind her. Boone lingered by Deeds a moment longer, then stood. "You'll live," he said, not kindly, "and you'll face trial." Deeds didn't answer. He simply stared at the dust, where the gate still hung open, where the war he started had ended without him winning. As Boone stepped back into his yard, the wind picked up once more, carrying away the scent of gunpowder and fear. The dust began to settle, but the story was far from over. The morning after the storm of gunfire, silence returned to the land, not as absence, but as presence. It wrapped around the Boone ranch like a quilt stitched from ash and breath, the kind of silence that follows endings, or beginnings. Mara stood barefoot in the front yard, the dawn chill in the earth beneath her feet. The bloodstains had dried, but the memory of last night lingered, soaked deep into every grain of dust. Somewhere in the barn, Boone was rebuilding the fence, repairing the place where Deeds had crossed. It wasn't over, not entirely, but the worst had passed, and she was still standing. She glanced toward the horizon, the same one she'd crawled from weeks ago. That broken girl in rags no longer lived here. In her place stood someone harder to shake and stronger than she'd ever imagined herself to be. Boone joined her, hammer slung low in one hand. "Sky's clear," he said. "Feels strange." He nodded. "That's peace. Hard to recognize when you've never known it." They stood like that for a while, two figures carved by struggle and stitched together by shared defiance. Then Boone said, "There's a marshal riding out from Larkspur. We wired him about deeds. He'll want statements. Witnesses." Mara didn't flinch. "I'll speak." "You sure?" "I'm done hiding from the things I survived." Boone studied her. "Good. Because what you did, what we did, people will talk about it. There'll be questions. Maybe stories. Let them talk." And talk they did. By the time the marshal arrived 3 days later, the tale had already begun its transformation. Deeds and his riders were now the Hell Creek Gang, and their raid was painted as a siege. Some said Boone had been a Union assassin who faked his death after the war. Others claimed Mara was a lost daughter of a murdered railroad baron, heir to a fortune, hunted for her bloodline. Neither of them corrected the stories. Some truths, Boone figured, were better protected by legend. The marshal, a wiry man with eyes that missed nothing, took Mara's statement word for word. He listened, wrote, then paused. "You realize what you've done here?" he asked. "We defended our home," she answered. "No. You buried a ghost. Deeds was wanted in 6 territories. You brought an end to something that's been haunting these lands for years." Boone offered a quiet glance. "He brought it to our door. We just shut it." The marshal nodded. "Still, there'll be reward money. Witness protection if you want it. Relocation." Mara looked around. The trees she'd learned to read, the field she helped seed, the house whose walls had held her through the darkest nights. "No," she said. "This is home." Boone nodded once, slow and certain. That night, the sky opened wide and generous. Stars spilled across the black, like lanterns over a sleeping town. Mara sat on the porch, boots kicked off, her feet on the railing. Boone brought 2 mugs, one for each of them. Coffee this time, not for alertness, but for comfort. "You did good," he said. "So did you." He sat down beside her. "You think Deeds knew?" "Knew what?" "That you were more than he made you." She took a long sip before answering. "He saw potential, but only in the shape he wanted it to take. You saw me and let me grow into who I already was." Boone nodded. "That's the difference between control and care." The wind rustled the juniper trees, dry and whispering. "Boone," she asked after a while. "Yeah, why'd you take me in that day? You didn't know who I was. Could have been anyone." He stared into his coffee. "You look like someone who'd forgotten what it was to be safe. I know that look. Used to wear it myself." She leaned her head against the post. "I think I remember now." In the following weeks, folks began arriving, quiet pilgrims, drifters, young riders looking for work, for purpose. They'd heard whispers that an old scout and a girl with fire in her bones had stood against the devil himself. Most came just to look. A few asked to stay. Boone let some help mend fences. Mara taught them how to set alarms in the brush, how to listen to the wind. One girl, barely 16, arrived with a bruised cheek and no name. Mara opened the gate and said, "You're safe now." The circle continued. Months passed, then years. The ranch became more than a place. It became a story. And stories have power in the frontier. Children played in the same dust where Deeds had fallen. New hands worked the fields. A garden bloomed where the old tripwire had been laid. And on cold nights, they would gather and speak in hushed tones about the day the riders from Hell Creek came, and the day they were turned away. Boone aged slowly, like the hills. Mar grew tall in the saddle, respected and sure-eyed. She wore a duster of her own now, patched and worn from use. But she never left the ranch for long. Not because she was afraid, she wasn't, but because she had built something stronger than vengeance. She had built a life. And one day, long after Boone was buried under the high oak tree with his boots on and his hat resting across his chest, Mara found a boy curled up by her gate. Rags, mud on his face, barely breathing. She stood over him, a shadow shaped by grace and grit, and in a voice that remembered everything and forgave it all, she said, "You're safe now. Come in."